Welcome to the course on the golden moments of addictions, alcoholism, and 3 principles webinar series. Greg Suchy and I, Harry Durbitsky, began these meetings in early 2017, and we have been thrilled with the success of the show. And I have been thrilled to work with Greg. He's added so much to the quality of these programs. The remaining video series will be video 2, which includes 3 remarkable stories of recovery by co-host Greg Suchy, our one guest facilitator, Christian McNeill, and a participant, Tonya Evans. These are beautiful stories, guys. The remaining video series will be extracts on specific topics in addiction. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Certainly, video 1 should whet your appetite for more. Lots of love to everyone. That's
I had spent so many years with the church telling me that everybody else was wrong and that was the only correct way. So I spent the next, almost 20 years of my life with nothing spiritual to speak of at all. So when I ended up in AA, it seemed like a really good opportunity to start this spiritual seeking. And that's exactly what I did. I started reading books and talking to different people. And I just really wanted to get something. And something inside of me was calling out, just saying, there's more to life than what I've been experiencing. The whole numbing out my experience because I didn't like the way I was feeling type of thing. And so my first introduction to the idea that thought holds any kind of power was I read the Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox, which really kind of blew my mind because I'd never heard of any of that idea before. I'd never even considered that thought could have anything to do with my experience in life. And long story short, that reading that book ended up with me in a book group reading that, and then we moved on to other books. But when I was 5 months sober, I went to a what we call a gratitude meeting, where they actually rent out a school gymnasium, and there's roughly 200 to 300 people that show up every year on Thanksgiving Day, and each person gets 30 seconds to say what they're grateful for. So we go through this. It took about an hour and a half to get through the whole thing, and at the end, in Akron, Ohio, the typical way of ending a meeting is they say the Lord's Prayer. So everybody got up, and we've got 200 plus people joining hands. And at that point in time, there was such an amazing energy in that room. And when you're dealing with gratitude and nobody complaining about a single thing, it creates such a beautiful space. And for a moment in time, I let go of my story. I let go of the thinking and the worrying and the predicting the future and all that stuff. And as soon as I touched the hands of the people next to me, I was no longer there in physical form. And I could see the energy that makes everything, the oneness of everything. And I could see each person was like a field of energy. And it was no different from the floor and the chairs and the walls, and everything was literally made out of the same energy. And there was even the same energy between all of those things, just at a lesser level. And it left me with this overwhelming feeling that everything's already okay, that I don't need to do anything to be okay. And that's the day that my desire, not even obsession, but my desire to get drunk and high just left me. And I spent the next about 3 years talking to people in AA, trying to figure out what had happened. So I had no way to put it into words. And unfortunately, the overwhelming response that I got was that whatever it was that I'd felt, whatever it was that I'd experienced was dangerous, because it had me feeling too good at too early of a stage in sobriety, because I'd only had 5 months sober and I hadn't worked the steps. So I was told there's no way that I could have possibly had any kind of spiritual experience. And that's how I spent the next 3 years until I came across the 3 principles. And actually, Bob and Marty are on here. They're the ones that introduced me. And I'm forever grateful for those two. They've been an amazing influence in my life. And I honestly thought that Bob was crazy when he first told me about these 3 principles and how they explain everything, how we experience life. And I was just, part of me said, yes, that's true. And the other part, the intellect, said, that's just way too damn simple. There's got to be more to it. Where's the 12 steps? Where's the 101 main points? Where's the process? And as it turns out, there is no process. Our natural state of being is one of peace and serenity and clarity. And the way to get there is to stop doing the things that take us away from it. There's really nothing more to it. Now, the intellect or the ego, whatever you want to call it, will tell us that there's plenty more. There has to be something more. That's where I was at that point in time. But as I gained a deeper understanding of the principles, I realized exactly what had happened to me back in 2012. And what that is I met God. I met myself. And we're all part of that. And Sid once said something along the lines of, let me try to paraphrase it because I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said something along the lines of, God is me, but I am not God. Meaning that we are all collectively, we are all this thing that has been called God for all these years. We're all that energy. And that's why even over the internet, like something like this on a webinar, we can actually feel connected to each other. And there's people like Harry I've never met in person. And Tonya, I've never met in person. And Christian and and Tom and Jeff, and I've never met these people in person, and yet I feel closer to them than I do to many of the people I know, in person, than many of my friends or family. And that energy connection is just absolutely amazing. But I don't know. It's really been an interesting journey, and it came to me recently that this isn't really so much a process of recovery as it is a process of uncovery. Because we're never really sick. We're never really broken. There's nothing ever missing. It's just covered up by stories. And the only reason I was able to have that experience that I had was that for a brief moment, I let go of those stories. I let go of my identity of that story that started when my parents gave me my name.
I was one of those people who started drinking when I was about 13, and you know, it just went. It was never particularly normal, and you know, it went until just my mid-20s, my mid to late 20s, and then and it's funny because I was, you know, what happened to me. You know, I really didn't want to stop drinking. You know, I really, really did not want to stop drinking at all. But I did want my life to get better, and I knew a bit about, you know, what AA was about and sobriety, and I so didn't want that. You know, what I wanted was to get, you know, to have a sort of normal life and not get into the terrible trouble that I, you know, get into. And it was a funny thing because in many ways my working life was pretty okay. You know, I could cope with that, but it was my emotional life that was a disaster. And I mentioned before that I had these terrible lows. And it's funny because everything now makes sense in light of the principles. Because I would notice that I could actually be suicidally low, you know, one night, and then the next day it was as if that hadn't happened. And that, at the time, that made me feel madder than ever, you know, because I kind of thought, if I'm going to be this low, I should be this low for weeks on end, you know. But I now see that kind of up and down thing is exactly what we talk about in the three principles, that, you know, it's just thought and feelings are just doing their own thing, you know, that we're just the recipient of them. Anyway, it reached the point where it really got out of control the more I tried to control it. And I reached a point where I really made a kind of disgrace of myself one day. And, you know, I went out, it was just before Christmas, went out for Christmas lunch, and I was supposed to have a nice afternoon shopping with friends, and I just couldn't stop drinking. I was absolutely smashed, and, you know, just an awful state. And it was one of the, I don't know what it is about mirrors and shop windows, but I caught a sight of myself late that night in a shop window, and I thought, you know, so just that moment of reflection, literal reflection, seeing myself and hating what I'd become. And I somehow got home, but it was like at that moment that there was a sort of surrender. I thought, I just can't do this anymore. I'm willing to go to any length. Maybe I didn't use that phrase, but, you know, that was the sense of it, to do anything for my life to get better, including giving up drink. And the strange thing now, you know, again, you can only know it, you can only see that it's true in hindsight, but that need to drink was removed from me in that moment. Because up until then, I would make resolutions to myself, and a few hours later, I'd be in the pub having a double, smoking, you know, sitting on someone's knee, that kind of thing. You know, it was a moment of grace. But I only know that sort of looking back, because it was effortless. So I didn't find myself automatically drunk when I didn't intend to meet, and nor was I fighting it. It was just like that was removed from me, that compulsion was removed. And I think, you know, I always consider myself a person of virtually no willpower. So thank God it happened that way, because, you know, I wouldn't have been able to fight it. You know, I know that sounds pathetic, but it's just the truth. Because in later years, I had, you know, and actually before that, I'd had issues with food and cigarettes and, you know, all of that. And it has been those moments of grace that have enabled me to change, or, you know, or insight, clarity, miracles, you know, whatever you want to call it. But today, you know, I just think that's I'm saying just, you know, that everybody, moments like that will come to anybody, I believe, if you're open to them, if you're willing to have eyes, if you're, you know, willing to hear, willing to you know, sort of take what's on offer. And, you know, after that, you know, I kind of did the as I said earlier, did the whole kind of AA thing, and my life did, you know, my life did change, and things, all sorts of amazing stuff did come into my life, which I know I would not have been able to either sort of achieve or like having children and being able to bring them up, and my children today are both delightful young people. They've both graduated from university this year, and sometimes I think I should go back to that hospital where I had my stomach pumped, or that kind of thing, and say, you weren't wasting your time, change is possible, miracles are possible. Anybody can. There is another way to be. But for me, it feels that the last few years of my life are beyond doubt, just the sort of consistently happiness. And it's been the combination of, being sober and the stuff that I'd learned and that had occurred to me while I was in AA, and the understanding of the principles, that it really was a missing link for me. The thing that changed it was the understanding, this thought feeling bit. I had some understanding of a voice within that. I've spoken about having had insights in the past, but I was still, what I was looking for life or the higher power or God or whatever to do for me was to sort of make the crooked places straight, to kind of take care of business on the outside. And once I saw that what's really on offer here is something even more powerful than that, and it's the capacity and the absolute certainty that it's possible to be at peace in the face of anything. For me, that's totally priceless. And I did not, I really discovered that, heard that for the first time when I came across the principles. And sometimes people say that, what Sid was, what Sid saw and what he was talking about is the same as teachers everywhere. And for me, that's not true. I think he saw something. I've never heard anybody else or read of anybody else who had that kind of 100%, that our experience is 100% created by thought, and the freedom and the implication of that is vast for me. So it has utterly changed my life, and it's unrecognizable today. Well, it's not. It's almost the same from the outside in some ways, but inside, that you spoke earlier about jealousy and insecurity, Harry, and I was plagued by that. I was really plagued by that, and again, it was because I truly believed that I couldn't have the things that other people had, and it wasn't so much material things, but say things like a happy family or a happy relationship. I truly believed that I couldn't, for whatever reason, I couldn't have them. And that because I couldn't have those things, I couldn't be happy. It was all very convoluted and ridiculous. And today I know that my level of happiness is completely independent of what's going on, and that it's more likely can make better decisions and better choices and have nicer relationships or nicer connection with people once the inside job is sorted out. But now that the idea of being jealous or insecure, of course it can come up from time to time, but it just isn't, it is no longer a sensible or doesn't make it no longer seems true to me. It just seems ridiculous,
with some, I guess it's an insight as to the workings of self in terms of, before my biggest, struggle, I guess you could say, would be, I was just always afraid of everything, mostly of feeling, and I was in constant fear and just afraid of everything, including myself. And what has been happening for me is I'm less afraid, and I'm more, my biggest struggle before too was relationships, and being in a relationship, and the biggest fear of like it not working and the person leaving me, or those kinds of like consuming awful feelings. And what's happening for me is that stuff is way less, and I'm seeing more the grounding piece of like, it's all just, that's a lot of just surface stuff, and the deeper feeling I'm feeling lately is just, there's a bit more grounding in that I'm okay, it's all going to be okay, and not get attached to all that fear. So that's pretty cool that's happening. And yeah, it's opening up a whole new world for me in terms of being able to feel secure when I walk out the door and meet the world.